Yeah, the Messara report's been absolutely massive. Of course, it's been put in a little bit into the background this week by all the harness racing scandals, but look, there's so many different parts to it, 17 recommendations. I don't think we can talk about them all and confuse them. Obviously, one of the big ones is the outsourcing of the tab, and that's a conversation for another day predominantly. The most emotional thing is tracks. We all have home tracks. Lots of people at home have home tracks which have been closed or will be closed. So what we did was contacted people from around the country, from a range of clubs, and sort of said to them, look, what do you make of this? What do you make of the report? And what do you make of someone potentially closing your track? Well, for example, Tim Antonio, we're not costing anybody anything. We can still make a go of this ourselves, so why shut us down? Now, that's a decent argument. I'm happy enough to hear that. And I think during these conversations about this report, you need to be able to listen to both sides of the argument. There's a little bit of the Donald Trump, I am right, and you must be wrong from both sides. The interesting one's Avondale, because Avondale was the centrepiece of this supposed $200 million deal, which is something like that.
Yep.
Now, at the moment, they are unwilling to publicly comment. So we're going to make an offer to anybody at Avondale who's on the committee. If you want to come on the show, we'll give you a camera. We're not going to edit it. Say whatever you want, because there's people like us and people at home who care about what's going to happen to Avondale and your attitude to that money of sailing and going to the industry. And I think if you're on a committee or you're the president, you've got a responsibility to do that. Now, you may not want to talk to us. That's fine. We'll send a camera out, or you send it a quote and we'll put it on the show next week. But Bruce, I think that's very confusing for people, because it's an enormous sum of money, and it's quite central to the some of the developments this report mentions. And if Avondale want to fight that, that's interesting. And if they say, no, we're happy to do that for the future of the club or the industry, well, that's fine too. But I think at some stage you need to make a comment.
Yeah, for sure. But going back to the track closures, like for me, two of the tracks dearest to my heart, Waipa and Cambridge, both are scheduled to close, and I think it's the best thing that could happen when you see this Greenfields proposal, and with the three clubs, Te Rapa, Waipa, Cambridge, working together, pooling their assets for the greater good.
Yeah, as I said, Avondale's the main one. Wairarapa, they're upset about the lack of consultation, and
the consultation starts now. Well, you know, a lot of them have jumped off the cliff here a bit and said, you know, we weren't asked, we weren't consulted. It's like, well, here's the line in the sand, and we start talking now.
Well, Sheldon, I think if people put their time and love into these clubs, they have a right to be emotional. Yeah. And it might take them a while to be unemotional or less emotional about that. I'm fine with these people doing this. I come from Greymouth, and they closed the trotting track there, and I was really gutted to see it close. And these people are gutted. And they've got a right to have their say, because the racing minister's had his say, and John Messara's had his say, and we've screened those extensively. So these people have a right to have their say, because they've gone to work in their gumboots and dug up holes in the track for 20 years, and they can have their say. Is it going to come to fruition? Probably not. I'm absolutely certain that we have to close tracks. Everybody I've been in this conversation with has said we have to close tracks. So no one is saying this shouldn't happen. They're just saying, I don't want it to happen to me. And that's just human nature.
It's a time warp back to the last.
You went for a walk to Riccarton yesterday with your little camera. What did you come up with?
I was on my bike, actually. We actually rang around for the quotes from the clubs, and we also rang around to get some comment on camera. And surprisingly enough, Malloy from the West Coast was keen to front up and give us peace.
In the media this week, it's the Treaty of Waitangi all over again. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's the biggest land grab in 180 years, isn't it? It's that course is owned by the people of Reefton. They were around long before New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing. The course was around long before Thoroughbred Racing, and the TAB was around. And yet suddenly now we only got it because of the TAB and New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing. I'd leave viewers to make their own mind up about that. You know, it's a land grab.
So, were you surprised that the suggestion of 5 clubs and racetracks not existing in the future came up in the Messara report at all then?
No, I wasn't really surprised. I was disappointed, but I wasn't really surprised by it. I very much look forward to the report. I'm on a fair bit of social media, and I made it clear that if we were collateral damage shutting down the track, I'm resigned to losing the race day. I always was. When the all-weather comes here, that we would lose the race day. What I object to is losing the asset to the people of Reefton.
What is the usual relationship between clubs on the West Coast? How would you describe it, you think?
Oh, it's very good. I mean, we have our ups and downs, we have our arguments, but at the end of the day, we share a secretary, a CEO, we share the starting gates. Obviously we have to cooperate. Kamara hasn't got stabling or anything, so that'll all have to be built when they become the dominant track, because all the horses stable at Greymouth, Huggerdigger or some start Reefton. But yeah, there's a good relationship. As I say, we have our ups and downs. As like anything, there's a bit of jealousy with the Kamara having a huge day from the public point of view, but yeah, that's human nature.
So in terms of the club relationship in normal circumstances, I think you were telling me last year at the Reefton races that with the weather that went through the West Coast last year, Reefton may have offered Kamara to swap dates to help them out?
Well, it wasn't really so much swapping dates. Kamara we knew couldn't run, and I got a tip on the Wednesday and I offered it to them. I said to them, Reefton is there and ready. Reefton was in a lot better condition than what Kamara was. I offered it to them, but to be fair, there was no acknowledgement. There was no thank you, no thank you, anything. It was just like I had never offered it. And Thoroughbred Racing didn't know that I'd offered it until the next day. Had they known, I think they would have made them take it.
So how does that go to the relationship of the clubs on the West Coast? You offer a way out for the Kamara Club and they just ignored you.
Well, I can understand their disappointment. They were really disappointed that their day was gone, and they think of it as their own, as it being pretty special, and it is. Maybe they just weren't ready for the offer. I don't know, but at the end of the day, you'd have to ask them about why they didn't take it up. I don't know.
Have the West Coast clubs ever had a meeting, unofficially or officially, about the fact that there are 5 clubs and 5 tracks on the coast? Have they ever had a discussion about that going forward, under the idea that perhaps, we've got too many?
Well, I did suggest to them about probably 10 years ago when the Racing Industry Board, I think it was the Racing Industry Board at the time, had the sort of money for that sort of thing, that maybe we should look at an amalgamation, maybe we should look at an 1800 metre track, something like Cromwell. Got a lot of resistance from the older members of the committees. They said, if we have to do that, we'd rather chuck it in. And I thought, well, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. And I just let it lapse. At the end of the day, racing is a sport I love. I love the people, I love the horses, I love the stories, I love the optimism, but it doesn't pay the mortgage.
Yeah, he's indicative of a lot of people involved in smaller communities and smaller clubs. Brian Malloy, he loves his racing locally, he wants it to stay, but he knew it was going to leave Reefton. By the way, just for transparency's sake, Brian's actually my cousin. I wasn't part of the interview, I didn't speak to him, I haven't spoken to him for a year until after the interview was recorded. But look, it makes a really interesting point. Like, there's too many clubs there, and I don't want to see them close. But a few people have said this week to me that this report must be adopted in its totality. Well, there's some parts about the report I don't understand. I know nothing about, but I know about Kamara and Greymouth. And Kamara's stuffed.
Yeah.
It's stuffed. It's Hokitika has to close. And Reefton is closing. We know this, and that's fine. There's going to be track closures, but that's the wrong track to leave open on the West Coast.
Well, you can ask any West Coaster if ask Brian during that interview which ones he'd keep, and of course he said Reefton because it's the best.
Well, but also you
track.
You keep a moto because 25 years
Yeah.
ago they used industry money to build a concrete grandstand there.
Yep.
It's
You said all
earthquake
of that,
compliant. It's just easy, and the track works. And there's stables there for when Dummy Myers and those guys come across to put the horses. Now, Kamara, I can't explain to you how stuffed it is. I've run around it, and I'm not slagging John Messara and his team. They are right. We need to close tracks. They've just got this fact wrong. And anybody who's ever walked the Kamara track knows this. You tell people in Greymouth on the coast, they're just laughing. They're like, that's ridiculous. Yeah. And if there's one error in the report, then stop saying we must adopt this in its totality, because that's just nonsense speak. We're at a process now, and Bernard Saundry and the Minister for Racing both said, we're going to talk to these people.
Go into consultation.
So we're going to talk to people about things. And I don't believe they'll close Greymouth, because you can't have one track on the coast, because then you can't have a circuit, and there's no point having a circuit because no one's going to go to the coast for one day of racing. But Sheldon, that was one person. Brian, you spoke to. Who else did you get hold of on the ground?
We got a hold of a good cross-section of stakeholders, actually, everyone from past presidents of clubs or ex-jockeys, and even a part owner of a former champion racehorse called the Phantom, when we collected a montage of people trackside yesterday at Riccarton to see what they thought about the Messara report a week on.
Well, I think the main thing, I suppose, is the carrot of doubling the prize money, and the big controversy, I suppose, is how we get there. And I think John's made a pretty good suggestion in his report. It was always going to be a little bit controversial, and Yeah, I agree with 80% of it, not all of it, but I think we need to do something to improve the current situation, and if it's all or nothing, I think it's all.
What about track closures? Thoughts on them?
Yeah, look, I think it needs to happen. I think there's going to be some debate about which tracks are closing, and I'm not sure it's 100% right at the moment, but I think we certainly need to be doing something and basically improving that racing product and making it more attractive for people to punt on.
All-weather track at Riccarton?
Yes.
All-weather tracks, do they attract the punting? Possibly not. They take a lot of getting used to, and I think the thing to do would be the real wet weather is on the west coast of the North Island, the Manawatu and the Waikato. Surely you would put one in there first and see how it went. They're an expensive investment. As far as I can see, we don't really need one down here at the moment, and I would definitely start with one in either up there somewhere and see how it goes.
If you were asked and you could put something in the mix that would secure the racing future of New Zealand, what would it be, you think?
The racing future of New Zealand depends on, to my way of thinking, depends on people becoming enthusiastic about the sport or maintaining the enthusiasm about the sport. So we've got to make sure the big days, the cup days, keep on working, and we've got to do perhaps more for the general interest throughout the year. How do you attract people to a place like Riccarton? Well, it's a nice way to spend a Saturday. The facilities need to be good, etc. So obviously money should be pouring into a place like Riccarton. But the big days like at Kura and Kumara, there are people there who don't have much to do with racing who've got plenty of money, and they may suddenly say, well, it wouldn't be such a bad thing to race a horse. So you wouldn't want to lose those days.
Having scanned the Messara report, no doubt in detail, what are some of the best bits of it for you think?
The best bits are track closures that should have taken place many years before now to stimulate the racing product and distribution of funds out to the owners that put so much in.
I have a difference of opinion on the track closures. I think we've got a shot at a lot of them. I think probably a slight review with some of the people actually in the industry, like trainers and owners, would be better than what it is at the moment.
Before they go with
what it is at the moment, yes. I'm not saying we should have more tracks or anything like that. I just think there's some tracks there still don't need to be there, and perhaps the odd one with better facilities would be better.
What about the all-weather track option in Christchurch?
I think the all-weather track in Christchurch and anywhere else, I think it'll be great as long as they get it right. If they get it right and we can trial and race on it regularly, I think it'll be far better for the industry all round.
If you just finally had a say in the Otago Southland scene, what tracks would you keep open and why?
I certainly wouldn't be closing Oamaru, Timaru. Wakawhite is a one-day club that invariably doesn't happen, and why would they keep that going if Oamaru is a huge track for winter gallopers in Otago and Southland, and so I don't think enough thought has been put into that, and obviously that's discussions that have still to be had, but just looking at figures of on course or whatever their figures might look like doesn't reflect the passion that the people have for that particular club.